The Straw Hat Pirates are one of the greatest found families in all of fiction, but not every member of this crew joined immediately or maintained their loyalty throughout. These are the Straw Hats that were antagonists. Jinbei. Now, many of the characters on this list will definitely fit more in the antagonist category than villains, but we're gonna go from the least antagonistic to the most villainous. Right now, we're starting off with Jinbei. Jinbei is like the antagonist that never was, while Hawkeye's Mihawk is our introduction to the Warlords. The name of the Royal Shichibukai, aka the Warlords, isn't dropped until the following arc, Arlong Park. When Yosaku's explaining about how powerful Arlong is, he mentions that Jinbei is a powerful warlord, like Mihawk. In exchange for gaining warlord status, he unleashed a powerful monster on the East Blue. And just the fact that Arlong used to run with Jinbei is enough to show that he's much stronger than the last villain, Don Krieg. The way Jinbei is built up here, it makes it seem like someone Luffy would have to face off with down the road, similar to how he actually did take on several warlords like Crocodile, Moria, and Kuma. But the perception of the warlords obviously changes as the story continues. When Jinbei is properly introduced during Impel Down, we see he actually would have been an antagonist to Luffy if the Yonko attacking the Marines was anyone other than Whitebeard, who the Fishmen owe a great debt to in protecting Fishman Island under his flag. Instead, he'd become the first warlord that Luffy teams up with. Last but not least, we have Whole Cake Island, where Jinbei had joined Big Mom's crew since she took over as the person whose flag was keeping Fishman Island quote-unquote safe. Jinbei could have been in a similar situation to a different Straw Hat in that arc, but when push comes to shove, he decides to help Luffy and join him, while handing Big Mom his letter of resignation. Usopp. Usopp is definitely antagonistic to Luffy in the Water 7 arc, when the Straw Hats find out that the Mary can no longer sail, as the keel of the ship is broken. Usopp can't accept this, and basically challenges Luffy's authority in front of the rest of the crew, as he feels that Luffy is just throwing out a crew member in the Mary, and that them getting a shipwright must mean that the Mary and his usefulness in the crew were waning. Little did he know Luffy had as much trouble coming to this decision as Usopp had in hearing it, but this would ultimately lead to Usopp challenging Luffy to a duel, and my personal favorite Usopp fight in the story. Usopp challenging his captain holds extra weight in this part of the story, as we had just come off the Long Ring Longland arc, where there was the Davy Back fight that played on the importance of crew dynamics, and now Luffy must prove that he can be a true captain to the Straw Hats. Sanji. Sanji is the first of a few Straw Hats on this list that does some antagonistic stuff, mainly for the greater good of the situation that he's in. When he's summoned to Whole Cake Island from Zoe on behalf of Big Mom, he agrees to go and marry her daughter for fear that retribution would come back onto his adoptive father Zeph. This leads to one of the most heartbreaking scenes, when Luffy and the Whole Cake part of his crew show up to retrieve Sanji. Sanji is forced to play the role of the villain to get Luffy to give up on bringing him back. We get the, in my eyes, very underrated, Luffy versus Sanji, which is really just Sanji kicking the hell out of Luffy while Nami watches, but Luffy knows that this hurts Sanji way more than it could ever hurt him. Sanji eventually goes on to team up with Luffy and Capone in the plan to take out Big Mom. Even after the Straw Hats do escape, Sanji blames himself for the death of Pedro, who sacrificed himself to give the Straw Hats a chance to escape. Next up, the subscribe button, because right now it's antagonistic to me.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
99% of the people watching these videos are not subscribed, and that's just pitiful. The videos are just getting better and better, the story is just getting better and better, so follow me along for the ride and like the video too so it can be shared with others that also like the video. Nami. Nami has always been a thief, even from a young child. When she's introduced into the story in the Orangetown arc, she steals a boat from some buggy pirates and steals a map of the Grand Line. She would only steal from pirates, similar to the next character on this list actually. Later in the Orangetown arc, when Luffy is captured, Nami pretends to join the buggy crew. Buggy wants her to prove she isn't loyal to Luffy and wants to make her shoot him with a cannon at point blank range. Although, she ends up turning on the buggy pirates and stopping the cannon from decimating Luffy. This wouldn't be the only time she would pretend to be a villain, and in fact, it's likely foreshadowing for her reveal a couple arcs later. At the end of the Baratier arc, she leaves the Straw Hats after stealing their treasure and brings it back to Arlong, the most wanted pirate in the East Blue. In her introduction / reveal as an Arlong pirate, she's confronted by a small child that wants to challenge Arlong for killing his father. She proceeds to completely dog walk this 7-year-old kid. Now I know she gave him a few bucks and ultimately did save him from getting his head chomped off by Arlong, but she didn't hold back at all and really beats the piss out of this kid. Ultimately, this really just shows her love for children, and she likely saw herself in this child, but it's just funny looking back on it. She talks to Arlong about her latest cop, and Arlong implies that this is a regular occurrence for her and that betrayal is her specialty, which shows that she's not new to this and isn't known for showing the sentimentality that she's clearly showing with the Straw Hats. Later in this arc, when Zoro is captured, she continues to be a villain to him until Zoro calls her bluff and jumps into the pool tied up. Nami couldn't just let him die, so she does save him, showing that she might not be that bad after all. And then there's even later on, when Usopp is the one that's captured, Nami puts on her best villain face and kills Usopp in front of everybody. Johnny sees this and relays back to the Straw Hats that she's really switched sides on them. But Usopp actually was alive the whole time, and she actually sacrificed stabbing her own hand to make it look real. Although Nami is too kind-hearted to ever truly be a villain, she is willing to do whatever's necessary for her own survival and to further her goals. Franky. Okay, so this is our first character on this list that truly started off as a villain for the Straw Hats. Because Franky's backstory is honestly a perfect villain origin story. A young shipwright apprentice who creates battleships, seen as a punk that creates weapons, but his father figure in Tom, who built the Pirate King's ship, teaches him that no ship is inherently bad. It's the people who choose to use it for evil that make it bad. Then Franky loses this father figure as the government takes him away, and Franky tries to stop the sea train, but instead almost dies and becomes a cyborg. He then changes his name and becomes a person on the outskirts of town who attacks pirates and dismantles ships. If Franky didn't have the heart that he does, it would be very easy for him to just go full baddie here. He could have easily ended up how Law was after his tragedy with the government, giving his entire country amber lead poisoning, where he just didn't trust anything and wanted to destroy as much as he could for the rest of his life. The Franky family's first appearance is them attacking a sleeping Zoro and repeatedly attempting to steal from the Straw Hats. When we first hear of Franky, he's basically just seen as a thug that people should be on the lookout for and try to avoid if possible. And then this idea is doubled down on when the Franky family beat down Usopp and steal the Straw Hats' money. But realistically, what he does isn't that bad. We feel it is because we have an emotional attachment to these characters, but you have to remember that 99% of the pirates in One Piece aren't like the Straw Hats and are actually some menaces. After the Straw Hats destroy Franky House and beat up the Franky family while he's gone, Franky goes after Luffy, and we actually get to see a great fight with him and Luffy before it gets interrupted by the Gali Law shipwrights. Even when Franky starts to team up with the Straw Hats in Annie's lobby, it takes a while for Luffy to warm up to him. Robin. Last but not least, we have the truest, bluest villain of the Straw Hat crew, Demon Child Nico Robin. Our current view of Robin almost makes you forget she was really on timing when it came to being a villain. When I was watching One Piece growing up, Miss All Sunday's clutch move was one of those ones that really stuck with me, because it was just really brutal compared to a lot of the villains we had seen up to that point, besides Arlong. Seeing her be Crocodile's right-hand woman really set her up to be a pillar that the Straw Hats would eventually have to take on if they wanted to help Vivi save her country. With her being an infamous pirate as well as a demon scholar of Ohara, it's not hard to see why someone like Iceberg would believe the hype when it comes to her. Similarly to Nami though, Robin had her own reasons for teaming up with most of the shady organizations she was involved with over the years. She wanted to protect herself from the government, and she wanted to continue to seek knowledge. When she saw the poneglyph in Alabasta and lied to Croc about what it said, it was clear that her goal wasn't ever to give him the ability of an ancient weapon, and she didn't even have interest in it herself. However, when we skip ahead to Water 7 and CP9 intercepts her, she feels compelled to attack Iceberg for the blueprints to the ancient weapon Pluton. I know she really just wanted to keep the Straw Hats uninvolved in what she ultimately deemed as her fate of being taken by the government, but it's low-key giving some Eren Yeager vibes that she was potentially willing to give the government the power of an ancient weapon, even though they may actually already have one. But you know, this is also how little Robin valued her own life at this point, and everyone she ever got close to would die and crumble around her. It took Luffy and the rest of her new family to help pull her out from under this darkness.